Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Awakened Blackwhip First? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Eat this. The words bounced around in Izuku's mind all morning, his best attempts at bleaching the taste from his mouth only further cementing the memory. Hair aside, Izuku's morning was going astoundingly well, no delays in traffic, which sadly meant no heroes to document. He hadn't seen Kaken at all on his way here, and now he was standing in front of the gates to the foremost hero school in the country. It was a sight to behold, the early morning glow refracting off the glass and providing some sense of warmth in late winter's afterglow. 6 statues lined the entryway. He didn't recognize any of them, but presumed them to be the likeness of several previous heroes. He stared in awe, spaced out completely, but was snapped from his daydreaming by a shoulder check from behind and a strong glare from what could only be someone with a vestigial Pomeranian mutation. Out of my way, nerd, he. Polite as usual, but at least he wasn't staring into the middle ground anymore. So with one first step he made his way into what he could only hope to be his future school, and with the 5th he hit a rock and did a wonderful impression of a domino falling, or at least would have. He felt something wrap around his waist and was pulled unceremoniously back onto his feet. My apologies, but I thought falling on such an auspicious day would prove to be quite the bad dash. Are you alright? You didn't get hurt when I grabbed you, did you? 2 voices came from behind Izuku, one from a bird-headed boy in dark clothing and the other from a ghost? Maybe it was their quirk? They seem to be attached to the bird boy's waist, so maybe it requires contact with another human to function? It seems like some form of shadow-based manipulation or mutation quirk. The only discernible feature was their almost luminescent yellow eyes and similarly bird-like form. Maybe they were relate, and he was saying this out loud, wasn't he? The 2 in front of him stared open-jawed before quickly righting themselves. It would appear so, but fear not, we all have our flaws. Mine, as you have somewhat correctly guessed, is my quirk. That's me, came the shadowy figure, and what a surprise that was. Ascension quirk? That's like one of the rarest types, and oh god, he needed to apologize. I'm so sorry for rambling like that. I think you have a wonderful quirk. Tokoyami Fumikage, and this is Dark Shadow. Now, we should probably move along. The dark waits for no one, not even the sun. Midoriya Izuku, and it was nice meeting you both. Izuku bowed as the boy walked away, his quirk waving giddily at him from the boy's back. Izuku quickly made his way toward the doors, happy to have properly talked to someone other than his mother for the first time in a long time. All might didn't count. The written exam wasn't too bad. Izuku completely destroyed the analysis portion, asking for several extra pages throughout the 3-page section. It would have been a lot nicer if the seating arrangements didn't have him sat squarely next to a walking grenade with an explosion FTSH, but what can ya do? After all of the papers had been collected by ectoplasm, and how cool was that? A pro hero so casually retrieving his very own test. The lights in the auditorium dimmed and a platform pushed up from the main stage, and out came. Are you ready? Let me hear you say yee-hee-ah. Present Mike himself was running this stage of the exam? Day. Ever. Izuku was horrified when he realized that only 3 people responded to the hero's call and response, even more so that one of them was himself, but he quickly got a thumbs up from a girl with what looked like long earlobes, a grin from the blonde 5 seats over from him, and a thank you, little listeners. You 3 are my new favorites. From a teary-eyed Present Mike, but still, Omi Goshwitz a little people respondem ganadi, physishoidisholj. Shut the F up, came a sharp hiss from his right, the small crackle of fireworks leaning into the implicit threat behind the words. Izuku complied. Present Mike ran through the coming physical exam in quick order, outlining 3 available robots that could earn the examinees points. The 1-pointer, a soft metal mech made to be about as strong as an average thug. The 2-pointer, a larger bot with the capabilities of a seasoned fighter with no quirk and a gun full of rubber bullets. And lastly, the 3-pointer, made to be about as strong as an E-rank villain, just as he seemed about to continue, a large boy with glasses and the posture of A printer low on ink stood up from his seat and raises his hand. Yes, examinee number 7111. Excuse me, but the handouts stipulate the existence of 4 villain bots. If this is a mistake at such a prestigious school such as you, I would be most disappointed. As he spoke, his arms began to chop robotically. I hope that's a part of his quirk. Maybe a mental addition based on some kind of present mutation? And you. The boy turned at an impossible speed and stared directly into Izuku's eyes. Oh yeah, this was going to be embarrassing. Please stop muttering. It is distracting. Are you trying to throw us all off? He was right, it was. Present Mike thanked the examinee and went on to explain the 4th villain bot. The 0 pointer, as its name would suggest, gave 0 points. Think of it like an unkillable field boss. The word unkillable was mildly concerning. How were they so sure it wouldn't be possible to destroy? Izuku was now aware of why Present Mike used the term unkillable, very aware, and that was exactly why he was running for his life as a behemoth the size of a large skyscraper came tearing through the city after any examinee unlucky enough to be taking the exam. Izuku didn't think he wanted to die today and just wanted to try to find a villain bot to destroy. Please, for the love of everything, just one. And then he heard it. If you asked him afterwards what he thought he was doing when he started sprinting full force at a giant mech hellbent on destruction, he'd say it was simple. He wasn't. But as he heard the scream for help coming from near the Goliath's treads, he did just that. He turned to the sound and ran full tilt, ignoring the other examinees he passed in lieu of finding whoever needed his help. Finally, he got to where the noise originated and found a purple mop? No, that was a person, someone with their leg caught under a veritable ton of concrete, crying for help. I'm here. Don't worry, I'll get you out, he yelled to the boy running. The last leg to the downed examinee. I'm here to help. Is it just your leg? No additional mutations? Nothing else caught? The purple-haired boy shook his head. Just your leg then? Okay, I can do this. On the count of 3 I'm going to lift the concrete trapping your leg. You'll need to pull yourself out, alright? The boy nodded. Okay. 1, 2, 3. God, this was heavy, but he pushed and heard a quick grunt as the boy forced his body back and his legs slid free. The only problem now though was getting away. Can you walk? Izuku turned to the examinee only to receive a shake of the head in response. Sheet. He could hear the thundering treads. They'd be too slow. That only left one possible solution. On all might I hope this works. He took a deep breath, clenched his butt cheeks and tore his arm forwards with a primal scream of Essenith. And as the black eldritch tentacles of One for All came tumbling out from him, he wait. That wasn't right. Isn't One for All supposed to pain? White-hot pain tore through his nerves, carved fire into his veins as an inky current of tendrils burst from his flesh and cascaded over, into and through the 0 pointer. But it didn't stop. It kept going. His arm was fully covered now, and it was only getting worse. His tracksuit shirt ripped open as more appendages burst from his torso. He couldn't see now. He could only hear the screams of the other examinees and the yell of an unfamiliar voice asking if he was okay. Izuku Midoriya was familiar with burns. He was subjected to hundreds if not thousands of them over the years. This was different. His skin was on fire and all he could do was scream and pray for it to stop. His veins filled with fresh fire every time he moved, which is considering whatever these tentacles were forcing him to move near constantly. Today was supposed to be great, his first chance to show that he could truly do it, that he could become a hero. But now, in a near eldritch sea of writhing black tendrils, he felt as if he'd failed. He didn't know what was happening, but 2 things were certain. 1, he was scared. 2, and this was the real kicker. This wasn't. Can you hear me? The scream of a scratchy, underused voice thundered into his ears. Yes, I can hear you, he thought. He willed himself to speak, a small gasping voice, barely a whisper, yes. It all stopped. The tendrils receded. He still hurt all over, but it was subsiding. All he could focus on was the purple-haired boy in front of him, a look of both horror and concern lacing his face. He looked scared, like he'd just done something unforgivable, and that's when he noticed it. He couldn't move his body. The boy told him to breathe deeply, and he did. After a few seconds, the boy looked less worried but still mortified. He felt his body return to him, and just before he passed out, he heard a croaking voice from the boy beside him. Thank you, and I'm so sorry. Please don't hate me. and then he knew no more. Hitoshi couldn't believe it. He'd tried so hard, but nothing was working. Maybe if he worked out more, maybe if he didn't have this quirk, maybe if anyone reached out to help him he wouldn't be like this. But no, here he was, trapped by his ankle under a huge pile of concrete about to be bulldozed to death by the equivalent of a skyscraper-sized Samsung fridge. He screamed out for help but no one seemed to notice or care. His voice was scratchy, underused and almost gone. This was the most he'd spoken in months. His current fosters didn't seem to like the whole brainwashing thing. He was about to give up when someone yelled out to him. He felt relief when someone actually showed, even more so when the short boy managed to lift more than 3 times his weight of concrete off his leg. That's when it went to sheet. The 0-pointer came too close and the boy seemed to decide upon something. Pulling back his fist, the boy yelled All Might's signature catchphrase and shot out a plethora of writhing void-like appendages, utterly decimating the 0-pointer. Why didn't he use those to lift the concrete? Or take out the threat sooner? If he had such a quirk, the tendrils quickly engulfed the shorter boy's form and all Hitoshi could hear were screams of pain as a veritable ball of eldritch mass ascended 8 feet into the air and attacked anything that got too close. Falling debris? Destroyed, the head of the 0-pointer falling too close, grabbed and quickly yeeted into the background. All while the boy at the center cried out for dear life. Hitoshi thought for a few seconds before steeling himself, yelling questions at the boy, hoping that he'd answer just one. After what felt like a lifetime to Hitoshi, his quirk connected. It was unusual, like connecting to an outlet and knowing that there's another device connected to the same grid, or in this case, 8 devices. It took him a second to snap out of his shock and he quickly told the now still and not screaming boy to breath and calm down. After a while he let his control go, the boy collapsing almost instantly, and then it hit him. He just used his quirk on someone without their permission. He was going to hate him. The first time someone had saved him and he'd ruined it, he sobbed and let out a choked, "Thank you and I'm so sorry, please don't hate me," murmuring apologies even after he noticed the boy had passed out. Soon enough a short lady came by with 2 robots that carried the short green-haired boy away. She said she was recovery girl, kissed his wound, and gave him some gummies. God, he was tired. She told him to take it easy and left to tend to other examinees. Hitoshi followed the boy's body with his eyes until the robots turned a corner and he was gone. Izuku woke up in pain, not much, but enough to notice. The burning feeling had mostly subsided but it felt as if all the muscles in his body had been torn through with a butter knife. He opened his eyes and looked over his body, moving his arms and legs under the sheets. Happily nothing was missing. He allowed himself a sigh of relief, apparently one a little too loud as it seemed to attract someone else in the room. "Good morning, Sonny," came a voice to his right. He looked over, saw nothing, then looked down. "No Migoshits recoveragiro the youthful heroine I heard schwer ketachuabutit such an honor to see heron person did she heal me wound sagodis hudthan care way to fime hirdo estat miana fela dogada got no points what tamagana tell my tan dash." "Don't worry, Sonny, you're okay. You can call me Chio now. Will you stop muttering? I'm getting old and I can't hear as well as I used to," she quipped. Sorry, what happened? I remember running to save someone and then it's all kind of fuzzy." Chio shook her head, exasperated. "What happened is you ran in to save a boy and ended up hurting yourself in the process. At least now I know why Yagi chose you. You've torn Alma's dash." "Yagi?" "Yes, All Might. Please tell me he told you his name?" "I swear if that oaf forgot to tell you, I'm breaking his shins." Izuku stared into the middle ground for a second before nodding and saying nothing. He seemed a bit lost but mostly fine. "As I was saying, you've torn almost every muscle in your body. Your quirk must have had a volatile reaction to One for All to do you so much damage." Izuku gaped. "Wait, you know about One for All? And All Might's real name and wait. My own quirk? I don't have one. I was quirkless before All Might gave me One for All." Chio looked at him for a second before sighing and grabbing her phone. She needed to call a certain blonde idiot and maybe a certain rat god about doing some research into what might be happening. "Wait here for a bit, Sonny. I'll be just a moment, we'll figure this out." Chio walked out the door and took half of Izuku's sanity with her. Izuku sat there, near catatonic. Bits and pieces were coming back to him now. A rush to save a boy, the feeling of fire through his veins, the pain, oh the pain, and the feeling of safety he felt as the boy saved him. If he ever saw that boy again, he'd thank him as many times as it took to get his feelings across. But for now, Izuku sat in his hospital bed and tried to pull forth that feeling again, the spark of emotion that released those things. He concentrated on the rush, the adrenaline, and finally the feeling of anger at the world for treating him unfairly all of his life, a controlled anger tempered after years of locking it up and confining it to the back of his mind. And through that string of emotion, a small tendril pushed its way out from his knuckle, heating his skin but not burning like last time, waving around like an octopus tentacle. He trickled more anger in until he'd made 4 of them, one from each of his knuckles. He could extend and retract them at least the length of the room, but when he added any more, the quirk seemed to try and pull for more by itself, growing uncomfortably hotter. He refused to let it and shut it down. It seemed that he could only control the 4 for now, and that the length didn't seem to affect his control over them as much as quantity did. He'd have to write this all due. He had his own quirk to analyze. Finally, he didn't have to pine away for something out of his reach. Day. Ever. Justice never sleeps. For I am here. The sound of Izuku's alarm clock jolts him out of sleep, and an untimely bout of accidental quirk use leaves said limited edition alarm clock pierced to the opposite wall of his bedroom. He wasn't sure what was making him cry more, the reminder that yesterday wasn't a dream and that he had a genuine quirk all of his own, or the fact he just broke one of his oldest collector items. He vaguely remembers dreaming last night, a sense of urgency but pride that left him confused but feeling like he did a good job at something. Yesterday was still a blur for him, a mad rush of apologies from all Miyagi for not telling him his real name. He'd sworn he thought he'd told him, and a solid hour of telling his mother state secrets and being questioned regarding his new quirk via a concerned group comprised of his mother, Yagi-san, and a mildly irate Chio. Nizu was there too, but he seemed far from concerned, more overjoyed if anything. My boy. I came as soon as I heard. The spray of blood did little to impress Chio, and the man was subjected to a rather harsh cane to his shin. I'm so sorry I forgot to tell you my name. I'd been sure I'd told you after our first day on the beach, and thought you kept calling me All Might out of a sense of respect or duty. Yagi bowed deep and rose to face Izuku, looking him in the eyes. This all must be confusing for you, and I'm glad you're taking this so well, but fear not. Young Midoriya, for I am here. Yagi smiled, his deflated form doing little to mask the pure trust he placed in Izuku. It warmed him to know Yagi didn't mean to hurt him, and he was relieved to know he wasn't going to be abandoned for not awakening one for all. Izuku smiled up at Yagi, tears threatening to pour down his cheeks, a wet chuckle escaping his throat followed by a sigh of relief. Thank you, Yagi-sensei. I'll do my best to live up to your expectations. A soft smile lingered on Yagi's face. Oh my boy, you've already done that. You did that the moment you cleared that beach. I don't think I could ever be disappointed with you. On one hand, Chio was happy with the moment between the two, on the other hand they had more to discuss. So, she coughed, breaking the two from their student-teacher moment. Now, about that quirk you showed off, I've called the rat to let him know we'll be up to discuss things soon, and I believe he's already called your mother. Izuku went to respond, and before you say anything, young man, she deserves to know. At that she gave a pointed look at Yagi. This oaf never needed to tell his parents? But you've got some, or at least one. Shizenji probed. She's divorced, ma'am. Hisashi didn't exactly take me being quirkless well. The flash of a bitter expression was their only clue to his mood. His voice stayed rather stable. After a few more checks from Chio and a kiss to make sure everything was healed, the group tentatively made their way up to Nizu's office. Just as Yagi went to knock, the door swung open. Izuku wondered if he was watching the cameras or was just smart enough to calculate when they'd arrive. He didn't think he wanted to know. He swallowed thickly and entered the room. A small animal sat behind the desk sipping tea and smiling like he'd just won the lottery. Yagi looked at that smile with sheer amounts of dread that only someone acquainted with Nizu would understand. Good evening, Chio, and welcome, Midoriya. Am I a mouse? A dog? A bear? What matters is that I'm the principal of UA. Now, have a seat. We still need to wait for Ms. Midoriya to arrive. She should only be a few minutes. The rat dog bear thing smiled at the look of hesitation on Midoriya's face. If you want to lie to your own mother, that's fine, but I'd highly recommend otherwise, little one, even though I am still unfamiliar with human societal norms. I have Heard it's quite disruptive to hide things from family. Izuku nodded vigorously. If that's what you recommend, Mr. Principal Nizu, sir. Now, would anyone like a cup of tea? I've got a pot of my personal blend going, but if you'd prefer otherwise, there's a kettle in the corner and a variety of teas to choose from. Be my guest. Nizu tried to smile comfortingly, but on the rodent's face it looked a little forced and mildly scary. Izuku settled on trying Nizu's own blend out of courtesy and quickly realized how different their taste buds must be. Of course, he'd never say it out loud. His mother raised a respectful boy after all. A few minutes passed and the flick of Nizu's left ear preempted the opening of the doors, a rather confused Inko standing in the doorway, seemingly mid-knock. Good evening, Ms. Midoriya. A pleasure to meet you. Come in and have a seat. What we're about to discuss is rather confidential. Inko looked worried, but the reassuring smile from her son helped calm her nerves. Apologies for my apprehension, Principal Nizu, but I am still unsure why I've been asked here. Nizu's eager smile lightened a tad. Nothing bad, I promise, Ms. Midoriya, just something that came up with your son regarding his quirk status. Izuku looked sheepish now, glancing between his mother and the emaciated form of Yagi to his right. Inko looked a bit confused until the words seemed to click in her mind. Izuku? Quirk? What? Is my baby okay? Did something happen? Izuku, honey, what happened? Izuku seemed to draw in slightly but mustered enough courage to say, Ego ta kirk fromel mitendik kindefit mefora betuntalua savid bithis purple-haired boy and didontrialino hot shapning because you'll might skirkazas stockpiled strength enhancer but when used didasumanthes long black tendril sandim soriad intil is before because he wasn't surya fakutali wanda waskara. Inko parsed the words through her inbuilt Izuku translator and promptly fainted in her chair. Nizu began cackling like a madman, his tea flying all over the place. He's pretty sure a bit flew into All Might's open mouth, but he didn't comment on it as it was probably shot out by the projectile shot of blood leaving his mentor's mouth anyway. Chio for her part just sighed and shook her head. What did she expect? After the older Midoriya had woken up and fainted another 2 times, everything finally settled down. Inko was still shaking a bit but looked a lot more ready for the conversation ahead, nodding along as All Might explained his quirk and the possible drawbacks. They then discussed Izuku's physical exam and the different quirk that seemed to manifest in One for All's place. Finally, they got to the present. Inko took a deep breath in. So what you're telling me is that you've been training my son, who is 15 by the way, without my permission, and you didn't think it would be a good idea to even notify me that you were giving him a quirk that could very well kill him if he wasn't ready. If you get my son to hide anything else like this from me, I'll make sure to show you why my ex-husband left the country when we divorced. Every single bit of your spine is a small object. Remember that. Inko leveled a glare that could scare Eraserhead into sleeping early, directly at Yagi, and all the man could do was bow and apologize. After the tension had settled down, in part due to Nizu's wonderful skills at brewing a good cup of calming tea, the conversation started flowing a lot smoother. The rat-eyed Izuku, now young man, what exactly have you discovered about your quirk thus far? And don't think I didn't see you messing around with it in the nurse's office earlier. The instinctual denial died on Izuku's tongue at the look Midoriya sent his way. Well, I found after some experimentation that the trigger for quirk activation is strong emotions and my current limit seems to be 4 tendrils. Nothing about size seems to change that limit, but I don't think I can make it any thicker than it already is. Izuku focused and let just enough controlled fury into the front of his mind to allow the quirk to sprout 1 tendril. Inko almost cried with joy. Her baby boy finally had something to protect himself with, but she held herself back. This was her baby's moment. Izuku stretched the appendage around the room, coiling around the room several times without issue. He drew the tendril back in and this time attempted to thicken the extra limb. This led to 3 things. 1. Izuku feeling blinding pain in his hand. 2. The table in Nizu's office splitting in half, and finally Izuku quickly reeling in the quirk to mitigate any further problems. Nizu smiled far too wide. That was exciting. Could I interest you in trying that again? Inko was mildly shocked at the power. Yagi was surprised enough to spurt up a bit of blood and Chio was already at his side checking on his now far too red hand. Nizu, I suggest we wait until we understand this further for him to do that again. His hand's muscles are practically threadbare. A shame. Well, another time then. The furry creature's smile again. Far too wide. Izuku asked Recovery Girl if she could heal his hand as he'd need it to write in his analysis notes, only to get a look of dread from the nurse and what seemed to be a silent prayer as she glances over to a now very much wild-looking Nizu sporting possibly the scariest smile today. Analysis notes, you say? Care to share? Izuku, wholly unaware of the minefield he just stepped on, nodded a bit embarrassed and pulled a lightly charred notebook from somewhere. The title read Hero Analysis for the Future number 13. Chio gave a look to All Might and he simply nodded. The notes were good enough. There's no saving him. He passed the book over to a still mildly manic Nizu, not noticing Chio and Yagi's looks of pity and resignation. Inko, however, did, and asked the two why they looked so shocked. Their only response, he's Nizu's now. That unnerved her a little, but she deigned not to ask. After a few minutes of page-turning, Nizu and Izuku talking and mild cackling from a psychopathic rat, the notebook was handed back to Izuku where it disappeared back into whence it came. The rat looked at Inko and did the only thing he thought was rational, asked if she was willing to share ownership of the boy. Sadly, he was given a resounding no. He'd just have to be happy teaching the boy in school then. Alas, the woes of a teacher, though with how much of his notes were coded using English under ciphers he might just be able to get the boy tested out of the class, freeing up a PRD for tutoring in hero analysis. Yes, that sounded lovely. The rat smiled. Today was a good day. I think that's all for now. I'll look into the previous holders of the quirk to see if I can find any clues into young Midoriya's seemingly random ability. We can't have him running around my school unprepared, can we? The rat smiled one last smile as they all began to leave. Izuku noticed the last bit of that sentence, but before he could ask, the doors closed behind him. Did that mean he passed? Or was that just Principal Nizu being nice to him? A ping on his phone alerted him and he looked down to see a simple message. Expect your letter in the mail by the end of next week. Tradition dictates I can't tell you your score till then. W. Something told Izuku he'd just signed his soul away to the devil. That something was pushed down and locked in the back of his mind with the rest of his doubts and issues. The following week for Izuku was weird. He mostly lived like normal, waking up early to exercise as he'd gotten into the habit to do so even when not full-on training, eating a healthy breakfast, showering, going to school, stamping down on the pressure pot of rage in his mind as his classmates hurled insults his way, going home. But that's where normalcy ended. As soon as he got home he'd get a message from Nizu consisting of 1 or 2 quirks to analyze and a Google Drive link to put his finished copies into. Once done he'd sit in his room, meditate and try to increase control of the tendril-like constructs of his new quirk. He still couldn't handle any more appendages, but he was getting better with fine control now. He was almost able to write using one. Was it somehow even messier than his normal writing? Was it readable for him? Barely, but yes. Izuku had been told by his mother that he'd need to name his quirk before his first day of UA, but for the life of him, nothing felt right. Izuku was currently deep in meditation. He could feel the thrum of something in his chest, almost like a second heartbeat behind his own. He reached out, feeling the wellspring of power inside, and was promptly pushed back out of meditation. A name branded into his mind followed by a massive headache. Blackwhip, that's what his quirk was called. He didn't know how or why he knew that so certainly, but to him, now it was like saying the sky was blue or that grass is green. Izuku looked down at his hands and marveled. Just what was one for all? And why could he still not tap into that power under his skin? From within the core of one for all, a bald man smiled. At least now he'd have the right name. Sadly, that was all they could currently do. But hey, baby steps, yeah? A sigh escaped a few of them as they sat inside the core of their shared quirk. Baby steps indeed. A week had finally passed and Izuku was getting worried. If the letter got lost in the mail he'd still be allowed entry, right? They didn't decide he wasn't worth it, right? Nizu was still sending him analysis packets, but maybe he's just being nice? What if Izuku, it's here. His spiral was promptly shot down by an exited Midoriya bursting into his room with an envelope, fresh Midoriya tears cascading down her face. He'd have to call the repairman again. They had him on quick dial for water damages for a reason. Inko gave him the letter and looked him dead in the eyes. Even if they deny you entry, we'll figure it out. You're not alone anymore. I need to be better and I'll never leave you, understood? She kissed Izuku's forehead and went to leave the room. Wait, Mama. I wanted to watch it with you. I know I didn't tell you much before the entrance exam, but when I asked you about changing my diet or get new clothes and equipment, you were always there to support me. I couldn't have done this without you." Inko was full on Midoriya crying now. He'd definitely need to call Shuk-san. There's definitely going to be water damage. The two Midoriyas sat on the couch in the living room. Izuku tore open the envelope, but instead of a letter, a small metal disc fell out, landing on the coffee table and starting to hum. Just as Izuku was beginning to think it might be a bomb, a projection of All Might appeared above it. "Young Midoriya. I am here." As a projection. Inko let out a startled eep at the surprisingly loud voice. "I'm sorry I haven't been able to reach you since the exam. I've been rather busy. Paperwork never sleeps. Did you think I was just here on holiday? Say hello to the newest Heroics 101 teacher. For I am here." All Might flexed comically. "Hurry up. I've got how many of these?" I'm sorry, this will have to be short." Izuku laughed as All Might sighed. "First, wonderful job on your entrance exam, young Midoriya. You achieved in the top 1 percentile of examinees and came out with 100% in both the English and quirk analysis portions. Way to go plus ultra. If that were all, you'd be given a place at UA in a heartbeat. But wait, there's more. During your physical exam, your last attack managed to wipe out 2 3-pointers and a 2-pointer, scoring you a total of 8 villain points. Sadly, this isn't enough to make it into the Heroics course." Izuku knew it. This was all going to come crushing down on him. He'd make it into the general ed department and All Might would ask for his quirk back and he was going to grow up a dash. If that were all the test involved. "I was a performer in a past life." Inko was once again tempted to murder this man, number one hero or not, for would we really be a hero school if we didn't take saving people into account? The screen changed, showing the purple-haired boy from his exam knocking on a door labeled office, and present Mike popping out to greet him. "Hello, little listener, how can I help you?" The boy quickly whispered something about giving Izuku his points. "Even though I don't have much, he saved me. I need to help him too or I'll never be able to count myself as a hero. Please, give him mine." The bow bowed low and Mike looked at him, a soft smile breaking his face. "Fear not, little listener, he won't need your points. I'm sure he'd appreciate the thank you when you meet him again." The projection cut back to All Might. "I present to you rescue points for saving another examinee at the cost of yourself and for the inadvertent safety of all other examinees on the field. You earned yourself a whopping 72 rescue points. Welcome, young Midoriya. Your hero academia." A scoreboard appeared in place of All Might and the Midoriyas could only stare as his name rocketed from 598th place to first, just scraping past one Bakugo Katsuki. Holy shit, he beat Kaken. Kaken was gonna kill him. Trying not to spiral again, Izuku looked over to his mother for comfort. Inko had passed out. Izuku decided joining her wasn't the worst idea, so as all Midoriyas can do, he thought of the word, shocking, and quickly passed out as well. He woke up 3 hours later to his mother humming and the smell of katsudon. Inko Midoriya was stressed. It was her baby's first day at school. Hero school. Oh god, he'd be in so much danger now. She knew her baby boy was strong, but this was heroics, one of, if not the most dangerous fields of work. What would she do if he got hurt? What if he ends up being bullied? Her spiraling was swiftly cut off as her baby boy descended the stairs, his ironed uniform looking wonderful on him. His tie could use some work, but that wasn't something time wouldn't solve. Oh my baby! The small woman practically glomped her child into the tightest hug she could muster, a small waterfall of tears somehow not getting his uniform wet. The mama bear held her boy out at arm's length and began to fuss. Do you have all of your stationery? Your water bottle? Notebooks? Extra notebooks? Your student ID? Do you want to bring some of your action phi dash? I'm fine, mama, just a bit nervous, and yes, I've got everything. Izuku smiled at his mother, scratching the back of his neck. I've gotta go or I'll be late. Izuku gave his mum a hug and made for the door. Aizu, one last thing. He turned around, half exasperated, but ready to listen to his stressed mother, even if it made him a bit late. I'm so proud of you. Both Midoriyas were in tears now. I love you, honey. I love you too, mama. And with that, Izuku exited his family home, ready for the day ahead. Izuku was not ready for the day ahead. Not only was he in Kaken's class, But the robot boy from the exam hall was there too, quite loudly berating the blonde bomber for his posture and state of dress. At least they both seemed distracted. Izuku quickly noticed two more familiar faces, a shock of purple fluffy hair seemingly asleep at his desk and an onyx feathered bird head, followed shortly by a third pitch-black quirk behind the latter, discreetly waving at him. He allowed himself a sigh of relief and slowly made his way around the room to the three, noting with some mild horror as he scanned the class, that his seat seemed to be squarely behind a certain rabid dog. Good morning, Tokoyami-sen, Dark Shadow-sen, I'm happy you both made it in. Izuku half-whispered to the raven-headed boy and his quirk, relieved when he got a positive response from the two. Good day, my partner in the dark. I only caught a glimpse of the power thy eldritch patron bestowed upon thee, but I must say I am imper-dash. Fumi thought you looked super cool back at the entrance exam, but he's too edgy to just say it normally. I thought you were cool too, all zoom and whoosh and bam. The boy's quirk cut in excitedly, a whispered revelry in the dark and a small blush was Tokoyami's muted rebuttal. Izuku was just about to make his way to his seat when he noticed the purple-haired boy stirring in the seat to Tokoyami's right. Dark Shadow's spiel must have woken him up. He also noted the sound of small fireworks and the sweet smell of burnt sugar. He'd finally noticed. Hi Kaken. Yup, he was so dead. Izuku Midoriya, the first student to die on his first day at UA ever. At least he'd be remembered? DKU? Definitely dead. But before the blonde bomber could explode, a loud zipping sound emanated from the front of the class. If you're here to make friends, you can get out. Get to your seats and be quiet. The class quickly complied. All stragglers chatting made their way to their seats and the classroom was bathed in silence. It took you all 9 seconds to settle down. That's unbecoming of future heroes. You will do better, am I understood? Most of the class nodded. The man behind the teacher's podium was tall, disheveled and looked like he hadn't slept in the last 3 years. He wore a baggy black outfit and a gray scarf wrapped itself around his neck, seemingly twitching every time the man moved. I'm your homeroom teacher Aizawa Shota. Put these on and meet me at the PE grounds. The now named Aizawa produced a box from behind his podium and tipped its contents onto the ground, a large quantity of PE uniforms spilling out. If nothing is in your size, check again, there should be one that fits each of you. You have 10 minutes. And with that, their teacher walked out the door, the whole class too surprised to respond. Immediately followed by a collective mad dash to find the correct uniform and a sprint for the changing rooms. UA was going great for Katsuki. He got to class first, settled down, got to tell an extra to F off and no doubt made his superiority known. So why the actual F was Deku here? Weak, quirkless Deku in the same class as him? Something was wrong. Did he cheat? Was this some kind of joke? Did he sneak into campus? Katsuki Bakugo knew one thing for sure, this wasn't how his story was supposed to go. He was supposed to be the only one from that backwater school to make it into UA, but not only did he apparently get second, Deku had also made it in. But that was fine, he'd be expelled the instant they realized he was just a quirkless loser. Now, if only that stupid rat from his acceptance letter told him who got first, maybe he could at least have the satisfaction of beating them into the ground and proving he was on top. Izuku didn't know what was worse. The staring at his scars or the red head next to him. Yo dude, those look so manly. Manly? No, these were reminders of how weak he was, they weren't manly at all. The boy kept going, completely oblivious to Izuku's growing discomfort at both the comments and the attention. Did you get them from training? You must have been doing some pretty gnarly spars to get such manly battle scars. We should totally work out together sometime, man to man, you're totally ripped. The boy just kept going, but he powered through, quickly got changed, responded just enough to not seem rude, and was the first one out the door and to the grounds. He didn't even notice the purple-haired boy trying to get his attention in the locker room, much to the boy's continued dismay. Shinso was ecstatic, the green-haired boy from the entrance exam. Was in his class. Hell, he was only 1 seat away. Maybe he could muster up the courage to thank him. Or maybe not. He tried to call out before Aizawa-sensei showed up, but the blonde a-hole beat him to it. Then Aizawa-sensei appeared and it was all too much of a rush to get his attention. He tried again in the locker room, But the shorter boy seemed dead set on leaving as fast as possible, seemingly unhappy with the comments on his scarring. Shinso rubbed at his own along his face, grimacing at the memories. He decided he'd thank the boy when he reached the PE ground. Steeling himself, he left the locker room. Aizawa was tired, his class was energetic, too energetic for his taste, though Hisashi would love them. He thought he'd hate everyone in his class, but no, he'd managed to nab the only mental quirk examinee that passed the physical portion. Hitoshi may severely lack physical training, but he had potential. The rest of his class, on the other hand, most of them gave him a headache. An egomaniac, a teacher's pet, a boy that can't use his quirk without becoming an idiot, and a mentally unstable legacy student, and that's only a few of them. Worst of all, he was stuck with a boy who he'd been told only awakened his quirk the day of the exam. Worst yet, Nizu threatened to burn down the manufacturer of his jelly packets if he expelled the kid. At least the kid was prompt, first to arrive, about a minute before the rest. The odd glances did unsettle him though. He felt like he was being dissected, studied. Oh God, why does he remind him of Nizu? Nope. Not paid enough. I'll quit after today and I'll move to the mountains and live isolated with my husband for the rest of his days. Hisashi would just have to deal. His thoughts were interrupted by a ping on his phone. But you're not allowed to retire for the next 3 years at least. Your contract is ironclad. W. 8:40 a.m. Why did he ever think becoming a teacher was a good idea? Oh right, Hisashi. When the last student arrived, Aizawa clapped his hands, drawing the class's attention. Now that you're all finally here. Today, we'll be having a quirk apprehension test. A brunette raises her hand. Excuse me, sir, what about the entrance ceremony? Their teacher let out a grunt of disdain. Simply put, we don't have time for that. My job is to mold you into viable heroes in only 3 years. None of you can afford to waste time on such meaningless things. But sir, surely that is against the rules? Came a near-robotic voice from his right, arm chopping all the while. UA prides itself on its unrestricted environment for the students. That same privilege is extended to the teachers and their scheduling. You could hear a pin drop. Now, you're all familiar with the basic physical fitness exams, yes? 50-meter dash, long jump, toe touches, so on and so forth. For the next hour we will be running through them as a class. Some groans could be heard. Midoriya Izu. Said boy looked up. You scored first place in the entrance exam. How far was your ball throw back in middle school? Katsuki went ridged. Izuku looked nervous. About 40 meters, sir. Aizawa grunted and threw him a ball. I want you to stand here and throw this ball as far as you can. Aizawa gestured to a circle on the ground, preferably using your quirk. Aizawa had to hold back as the class erupted into chatter. We get to use our quirks? That's awesome. The straw that broke the camel's back. This is gonna be so fun. Aizawa had enough. Fun? You all think this is all just fun and games? Okay then. The person who comes in last place will be expelled. This is final. He dared the class to respond. No one did. Katsuki seemed to finally snap out of it at that and began laughing. No matter what slimy trick he'd used to get into this school, when they found out he was just a quirkless loser they'd chuck him to the curb, and the best part? He got a front row seat. It didn't matter to him that he got first. He must have bribed someone high up, or something, just meant that Katsuki was technically number one. When the nerd stepped up to the circle, however, Katsuki's heart stopped. Deku set his face in concentration and summoned an inky black tendril from his forearm, attached it to the ball like a rock sling, spun it around, and shot the ball off into the distance. What the F dash? The nerd had a quirk? Shitty if Deku had a quirk? Deku. Katsuki's hands ignited in a smoldering burst of fire and kinetic force, tearing his way through the other students, intent on painting the grounds with the boy's insides. Only for his quirk to come to a complete stop mid-leap. Izuku had to think fast. What was the easiest way to use his quirk to shoot a projectile? What would get him the most distance without exceeding his current limits? He settled on the approximation of a rock sling, spinning the ball around to generate momentum. Izuku concentrated on the sling, and when it reached the apex of one of its faster rotations, he cancelled his quirk. The ball went flying what had to be a few hundred meters, probably about the best he could do. Izuku turned to his new teacher expectantly, fully prepared to be told the machine glitched and he'd have to redo his throw. After all, part of all of his past teachers' jobs seemed to be making his life as hard as possible. Aizawa smiled at the result and made to turn his reader around to the class when, Deku! So this is how I die, came Izuku's first thought. At least I got to enjoy the first 10 minutes of my dream. The sound of fireworks assaulted his senses, mild tinnitus filling his ears and the smell of caramel pierced his nose. Izuku instinctively curled into a ball, protecting his vital organs as best as he could. But the usual pain never came. Izuku peered out through his knees and what he saw shocked him. Kaken was suspended in the air by a spool of thick gray fabric, not using his quirk, no, unable to use his quirk. He snapped his head to his teacher. Aizawa's hair was standing on its ends, his eyes were bright red and Izuku caught a glimpse of metallic yellow under the loosened fabric of his scarf. Holly shit me teacher Saraser head. Kemi second favorite hero. Siligen Funderground heroic Sandbosken highest successful villain capturary Terai Tafter and devour hims. Why was everyone staring at him? Oh god, he said that out loud, didn't he? Aizawa stood dumbfounded, the only thing keeping his quirk trained on his blonde student being years of ingrained practice. This kid knew who he was. No one knew who he was. You're telling me some random kid knows enough about me to recognize me from a single glance at my quirk? How did that Manizu? That's why he wanted the kid so bad. Brat, let me make one thing clear. You ever try that again and I'll expel you before you can say the word villain. Katsuki gaped at the man, seemingly stumbling over his words. One last glare shut him up, but didn't stop him from glaring daggers into Izuku. Good. Let's continue. Hitoshi knew it was his time to strike. Aizawa was focused on the 50-meter dash, and Izuku wasn't talking to anyone. It was perfect. The purple insomniac trudged over to Izuku and tapped him on the shoulder. As the boy turned around, he bowed deep. My name is Hitoshi Shinso. Thank you for saving me in the entrance exam, and I'm so sorry for using my quirk on you. It'll never happen again. The boy said seriously, a tinge of bitter resignation in his voice. Izuku spluttered, entirely caught off guard by Hitoshi's actions. And oh, no worries, I'm glad I could help. And you don't need to apologize. I hardly noticed you using your quirk at all. It was super helpful though. Is it some form of forced passivation? Maybe a response-based melatonin producer? I remember responding and then falling asleep, but not a lot more than that, sorry. Izuku began muttering, his words only barely understandable to the poor insomniac who now looked mildly uncomfortable. Response-based mind control. He murmured. That snapped Izuku from his rant. Pardon? Hitoshi took a deep breath in and said a little louder. Response-based mind control. If someone responds to me, I can take over their mind. I know it's villainous and I'm sorry for using it on you without your permission. Izuku's eyes lit up at the quirk, then sharpened at the self-deprecation. Villainous? What do you mean? That's like the perfect quirk for hostage situations and de-escalation. Your quirk is amazing. Hitoshi looked taken aback. You think I could be a hero? With a quirk like mine? Of course. Anyone who thinks otherwise is an idiot. Sadly for them, Izuku's outburst had drawn the attention of basically the whole class, including Aizawa-sensei. Sorry, sir. Izuku shrunk under the stare. Izuku was soon called up for the 50-meter dash and honestly, he wasn't quite sure how he'd use his quirk for this one, his limited planning time certainly not helping. Then, an idea. Blackwhip's texture and properties seemed rather diverse, seeming to stick to some things, pierce others, and could both ensnare objects yet also resist being grappled. Listing off, it was sticky, rough, sharp, smooth, slippery, solid, and elastic. Maybe his intent had some effect on the property of the tendrils? Izuku thought hard about sticking to something and released an appendage. Giving it a tentative poke, he noticed it cling to his finger. He then imagined it being slippery and his finger seemed to slide out of its grip almost instantly with barely any friction at all. He could work with this. As he got in line, Izuku primed his quirk. Taking off his shoes, he produced a tendril on each foot, imagining them to be sticky. He almost immediately fell on his, but from his new lack of reactional balancing, Cursing himself for not thinking that through all the way but deciding his new position would be more effective, he steeled himself. This was stupid, but it might just work. As the buzzer went off to begin, he produced 2 long tentacles from his forearms. Willing them to be elastic and sticky, they made contact with the ground a few meters ahead and he imagined pulling them back in, the strands tightening and becoming thinner and thinner, the pull on his arms almost unbearable. Katsuki was nearly at the finish line now. Then, just as he thought they might pull him from his position, he willed the tendrils at his feet to be slippery and barely had time to cancel the elastic ones before he could be sent backwards, as his near-frictionless feet carried him faster than he'd ever imagined moving. The only thought he could pass before he shot past Kaken a hair's breadth before the finish line. This was a terrible idea. Izuku had no idea how he didn't die in the 50-meter dash, but the rest of the exam passed by a lot smoother, Izuku using his quirk to the best of his ability. High jump? Izuku used Blackwhip to grab the bar and fling himself above it, nearly landing on the bar instead of the mat. Side to side? Blackwhip on each arm, extending and retracting in rhythm, only making him a little queasy by the end. Seated toe touches? Yeah, he had nothing. He could probably pull his arms forward with his quirk, but that risked pulling them from the socket or just snapping him in half like a Kit Kat, a risk he was not willing to take. Finally, the endurance run, he decided against repeating his 50-meter dash, partly in fear of messing up, but mostly because of the course's circular nature. There was no way he would be able to turn whilst doing that. Instead, he just ran. Nothing special, but with all of the training All Might had put him through, Izuku could run a small marathon. Would he be exhausted? Could he do it though? Also yes. As the final scores were being tallied, Izuku noticed one of his new FR peers, Hitoshi, looking nervous. He walked over to him and gave him a stiff nod and a look of nervous reassurance. Shinso gave a brief nod in return. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. It was nice to have someone so relatable. He just hoped that Hitoshi didn't come in last. The scoreboard was displayed holographically. Izuku was shocked by his score but quickly put it to the side as he saw Shinso's reaction. He scanned the charts. No, that's... He sent a concerned look over at a very catatonic purple-haired teen and prayed that this was some cosmic joke. He knew Aizawa's track record. He knew that his last first-year students were all expelled within the first week, but he still held out hope, and by some divine luck. I was lying about the expulsion. Izuku and Shinso snapped their gazes to Aizawa-sensei. It was a logical ruse, to make sure you all did your best. Almost everyone let out a sigh of relief, bar a certain tall girl with raven hair. Wasn't that obvious to everyone else? The girl was sent several deadpans and complaints, but Izuku knew something must have changed his mind. Shinso looked ready to complain, but Izuku gave him a sharp glance and whispered, "Last year's class was expelled within a week. He wasn't bluffing. We must have done something right." Aizawa must have heard as he sent a sheet-eating grin at the 2 teens. This year was going to be a roller coaster. Aizawa dismissed the students, noting that each one should have a packet on their desks upon returning to their homeroom and that they were free for the day. Just as Izuku had picked up his packet, he felt a low vibration from his pocket. Care for a cup of tea, Izuku-san? I have a fresh pot of my special blend. Prepared. Tenim. Looks like his day wasn't quite over yet. He bid goodbye to Shinso, Tokoyami, and Dark Shadow before making his way up to the principal's office. When he arrived, he tried to fake out the door by pretending he was going to knock, but it only opened the one time he was planning on following through. Izuku couldn't even begin to understand how that worked, so he chose not to. Good day, Izuku-san, I have news. I've already discussed this with Yagi-san. Take a seat. The rat gestured to a place on the couch across from him with a fresh cup of tea. Izuku sat. Nizu smiled. Now, I've been doing some research through historical records and I've discovered this. The principal pushed forward a thin folder titled Lariat. Izuku read through the 2 pages present and took a sharp breath in. This was Blackwhip, down to the name and everything. From what we've gathered, this is seemingly the 5th holder of One for All, his quirk having an awakening near the end of his career that amplified his strength. Such cases go back further, but beyond him they get harder and harder to get reliable information on. Izuku nodded and the rat broke into a much too wide smile. Now the real question, How and why do you have his quirk and not the strength enhancer one far all is known for? Nizu took a sip of tea to calm himself. My current theory is that the quirk was too strong for you when given, and to prevent your brutal dismemberment it forcefully awakened another quirk instead, one of its previous holder's quirks. Any thoughts? Izuku was honestly stunned, the only thing that came to his mind being two words. Quirk singularity? The rat had to stop himself from laughing like a madman. He was right to choose this kid. Instead he settled for a predatory smile. Precisely. After Nizu's quick chat regarding the secrets of One for All and the groundbreaking proof that quirk singularity actually existed or at the very least shouldn't be laughed out of the scientific community, they deigned to calm down with a short and concise analysis of a newly licensed Roman hero. Colosseum's quirk was simple and effective, but to Izuku he was using it all wrong. It allowed for him to lock his opponent in a one-on-one fight as long as he made contact with his opponent and no one else tried to butt into the fight. He was currently using this to actually fight his opponents, usually coming out rather damaged in the process. Izuku theorized the man could use his quirk to distract a villain and to stop them from escaping whilst backup arrived. Then, upon reinforcements, all they had to do was interrupt the duel and outnumber the villain. Or even better, hit them with a sneak attack while their focus is centered on him. All in all, their chat lasted for about 30 minutes. Izuku left the rat with his filled-out analysis sheet and made his way to exit the building, only to notice 3? 2.5? 2? No, definitely at least 2.5. Figures near the entrance gates, the two humans seemingly trying to out-deadpan each other, and the quirk happily chatting away from the side of them both. Why were they still here? Dark Shadow seemed to notice him first, waving excitedly in his direction, Tokoyami and Hitoshi following quickly behind with much less energy. Hello Midoriya, as we are both creatures of the dark, I thought it polite to invite you to dash. Fumi-chan wants to hang out, said Boy grimaced. I do too. Let's go to an arcade. Dark Shadow as per her seemingly usual pattern cut through the boy's edge like a knife through butter. I'm coming too. Adults don't want me home till I have to be. That's a little concerning. Maybe he'd bring it up with Nizu later, for now he was being asked to hang out. Sure, that sounds great. I'll be in your care. Izuku gave his best smile, or the best a nervous teen could muster, and the three began to walk. I have already informed those who gave birth to me and my blight, but have you Midoriya? Tokoyami queried just outside of the gates. Oh God. He'd almost forgotten. Thank you Tokoyami, one moment, sorry. Done. As soon as the message was sent, Izuku's phone exploded into vibrations. From the look of it, a majority of the messages were tears? The buzzing stopped about 5 minutes later, revelry in the dark. The boys barely spoke as they made their way out of the school, luckily, and unbeknownst to the three, Katsuki had decided the nerd must have ran off first and didn't try to catch him near the entrance, though, just like all other teachers Katsuki was sure they wouldn't mind him beating up the loser, as long as he wasn't disrupting class. That had to be why that shitty hobo stopped him last time. Katsuki was the best after all. Nothing he could do to a shitty nerd would change that. He was gonna be the #1 hero, goddammit. Izuku hadn't been to an arcade in years. Mainly due to his sheer lack of friends to do so with, but that wasn't important now. What was important was the sheer amount of fun playing games with people that didn't want to blow him up was. Even when they were kids, Katsuki hated to lose. Anytime Izuku even came close to his score in anything, he'd rough him up. But that was fine, all in the past. Are you okay, my fellow emissary of the shadows? Izuku turned to the gothic bird, mildly confused. What do you mean, Tokoyami-san? I'm fine, great in fact. Shinso hesitated for only a second, still not used to speaking. Well, at all really. You're crying. Izuku wiped at his eyes, only now realizing how wet they felt, and sure enough, he was crying. Gods, you're embarrassing. Oh no, what if they hated him now? Deku's crying again. And here they were being so nice to him. Does little crybaby Deku need his mama? Then they'd... Izuku! He snapped to attention, both boys and a sentient quirk giving him concerned looks, not even a hint of mockery in their eyes. He was spiraling again, wasn't he? Maybe he should make a session with the school therapist Hound Dog. He was already recommended to two. Deal with the stress of being All Might's chosen successor, surely bringing it up in one of those sessions couldn't hurt? Izuku zoned back into the current issue. Sorry, I'm alright. I'm alright, just happy tears is all. He scrubbed his eyes dry. I know I shouldn't be crying, I'm sorry. Shinso and Tokoyami shared a look, Dark Shadow far too preoccupied with a fighting game to notice anything going on. It's fine to cry, Midoriya, we all need to let it out sometimes. Shinso tried to smile, but with his lack of social skills it came out more like Aizawa's sheet-eating grin from earlier that day. I concur, even I, as a herald of such dark and viscous powers, still find the time to express my deepest inner self. The bird boy nodded solemnly. I haven't hung out with anyone in a while, and I was just thinking of the last time anyone asked me to come to the arcade. I didn't end well. Izuku scratched at the back of his neck, a morose smile adorning his features. This is all so new to me and I just got a little overwhelmed is all. Thanks for bringing me along. The two in front of him were shocked to say the least. Here was a kid with a strong flashy quirk and a heart of gold, who is seemingly just as used to being bullied and ostracized as a kid with a brainwashing quirk and an emo with a giant bird head. What? The two glanced between each other and shared the same thought. We must protect this green bean. It's okay, Midoriya. I'm not too used to this either. I think the first time I properly talked to someone in quite a while was present mic after the entrance exam. Tokoyami nodded along. I too was shunned by my peers, my demonic blight seen as going against nature. That and the fact that I was cursed with the form of a raven, quite fitting for the herald of death and darkness I am. Tokoyami struck a pose, leaning his head back with a hand over his right eye. Hitoshi barely managed to hold back a snicker. Izuku on the other hand exploded into patented Midoriya tears, luckily not enough to damage the arcade machines. Why are you guys all sitting in the corner? I need new opponents. Hurry up and come play with me. Dark Shadow's childish interruption broke the three from their state of depression bonding and they all managed to share a laugh at the inky quirk's expense, placating her by joining her in Mighty Hero Smash 7. One of the arcade's more popular fighting game and one Izuku was familiar with from the console version he used to play in middle school online. Izuku idly wondered what Dust 41 was up to these days. He didn't seem to take Izuku's leaving very well. Time passed quickly for the teens and after a few rotations of the arcade they were both almost out of time and almost out of money. Deciding that it would be a good idea to grab some food before leaving, the trio made their way to a fast food joint and sat down to wait. Sorry we have to cut this short, but my adults will be expecting me home soon and I don't want them thinking I'm out doing anything unsavory. It was nice hanging out with friends though, we should do this again sometime. Hitoshi's grin was only mildly forced this time, his muted expressiveness not giving him much to work with. I too wish to venture forth with my new comrades of the Dark Aga Dash. Again. This was so much fun. Fumi-chan's all boring at home. This was great. Izuku stared for a good few seconds but in a muted, hopeful tone he asked. We're friends? The two males of the group looked at him, a look of mild confusion on their faces, cut off rather abruptly by Dark Shadow. Oh, course we're friends. You're super cool, Izuku-an, you too, Shin-chan. Both Tokoyami and Hitoshi nodded in agreement with the sentient quirk's sentiment. Shinso grimaced a bit at the nickname but seemed to accept his fate quite quickly. They got their food shortly after and ate in mostly silence. Izuku was fascinated to note that Dark Shadow also appeared to be eating. Did they share a stomach? Did she need food too? Could she even taste? Izuku descended into a mutter storm between bites. The others didn't seem to mind as he continued to dissect the quirk before him, though Dark Shadow herself seemed a bit shy at all of the attention. After finishing up and disposing of their trash, the small group parted, Tokoyami's attempt at a cool exit foiled by the hyper quirk once again waving from behind his back. Shinso and Izuku stayed together until they reached the train but both ended up going in opposite directions. Hitoshi thanked him for the fun time and told the boy to call him by his first name. Izuku bowed far too deep and told Shinso he could, if he was comfortable with it, of course. Izuku got home and crashed. Today was a day and a half, but at least it was over now, right? The youngest Midoriya lay in bed sweating, tossing and turning in his sleep. the faintest cracks of ethereal energy sparking from his chest before receding into his core. "Okay. I think we have a connection," came a gruff voice from somewhere in his head. "Testing, testing. Can you hear us, kid?" "Sheet," no response. "Maybe a little jolt work." Izuku could feel a tug inside his mind. He felt groggy but tugged back. He opened his eyes. A tendril of Blackwhip spun from somewhere below his neck, tethering him to a void filled with stars. He pulled on his quirk and it quickly dragged him through the space, drawing him closer to one of the brightest stars. It was orange, and probably the fourth largest he could see. As Izuku got closer, the star began to change, a figure appearing from its glow and dimming the light. Before him stood a bald man about a head taller than himself. Yellow goggles adorned the man's head and a grin reminiscent of Hai Shinso was plastered onto his face. "Hey kid, sorry for disrupting you in the middle of your beauty sleep, but we thought it prudent to chat." This was the weirdest dream Izuku had ever had. Then it hit him. This guy's face was familiar, but where had he seen Izu's file on the previous user? This wasn't a dream, was it? If Izuku could pass out in a dream, he would have. Instead, he settled for going catatonic for a few seconds. "You okay, kid? Hello? You in there?" "Earth to 9th. The man seemed to give up and clapped Izuku over the skull, effectively pulling Izuku from his trance. "Listen up, I don't know how long I got. First of all, I'm 5th, name's Daigoro Banjo. We've been messing around in here for a bit and finally managed to pull you in, but we have no idea what it'll do on the outside. Why here?" Izuku nodded. Dumbly, going to respond before realizing he couldn't speak, or really move, or breath. Oh god, he couldn't breathe. Izuku spent a couple of seconds stressing before he realized he seemingly wasn't suffocating and decided whatever the past user could have to say was probably a good distraction. Simply put, you're too weak. If Izuku could gape, he would. "Sorry, sheet, wrong way to put it. What I'm trying to say is your body's not ready. The backlash from one for all strength enhancer would have broken every bone in the limb you used it on." Izuku kind of expected that from his talk with Nizu, but it still hurt. "That's where I came in. Lucky for you, one for all hit singularity faster than expected, and I was able to shove Blackwhip into you before strength stockpile could worm its way through. I know. I'm a genius. Unluckily for you, that kind of stuck us in here for a bit. Took some rerouting to get a connection to the outside working, but we should all be able to talk to you soon." Izuku again was shocked. "So, don't freak out if you start hearing voices. That's probably us. When you wake up tomorrow, ask 8th about all for one, even if he is dead. Which we doubt. You still deserve to know what it means to have this quirk." The man's gaze hardened into a serious frown. Then from somewhere in the space behind him, he felt a pull. "A sheet, we're out of time." Daigoro began to spiral back into himself, the void seemingly swallowing him up. "One last thing, kid." Daigoro crossed his arms and gave his best attempt at a proud smile. The man must be related to Aizawa. That kind of smile couldn't be anything but hereditary. "You're doing great. Keep up the good work with your quirk, kid." His smile softened as his body collapsed back into an orange star. Izuku felt a warm sense of pride at the words. It was his now. The green-headed teen woke up stuck to his sheets, his blanket torn up on the floor and almost all of his merchandise in varying states of misplaced. He didn't want to know how the Endeavor figure stuffed into his bottom drawer ended up in his trash can, nor how it was broken into several pieces. It was earlier than he'd usually get up, but he knew he wouldn't be getting back to sleep, so he had a cold shower, went for a jog, and messaged All Might that they needed to talk at his soonest convenience, preferably with his mother and Nizu present. He got a ping on his phone a few minutes after. "Small Might, does today at lunch work?" 7:15 a.m. He asked his mother if she was free, then sent a positive reply. What was all for one? The way Fifth spoke of it, it seemed to be a person, but Izuku had never heard of them. From an outside perspective, Izuku's smile was a bit forced, but that was nothing unusual for what appeared to be a new first-year UA student, and thank God for that. Izuku didn't think he could handle being asked if he was okay right now. It honestly took a lot longer than Izuku thought for last night to truly hit him. So there he was on the train to school, practically hyperventilating. It was rather impressive the boy's genes hadn't kicked in and had him pass out yet. Izuku apparently had at least one, if not 8, ghosts trapped in his head, or core or something. That's fine, this is fine, he's fine. Quirks are always at least a little weird, this can't be that much worse, right? Kinda like 8 dark shadows, yeah, that's much more manageable. Izuku bumped into Shinso at the train station, the purple-haired boy clocking his nervous energy almost immediately but deciding not to ask. The two made their way to UA together in silence. By the time they'd arrived, Izuku was a lot more calm and a lot less likely to pass out. When Izuku and Shinso arrived at class, they found Tokoyami already in his seat. A very energetic dark shadow behind him, trying her hardest to strike up a conversation with the ice quirk student who came third in yesterday's quirk assessment. It wasn't going all that well. "Good morning, Tokoyami-san, how are you this morning?" Shinso started. The bird-headed boy had a look of tired acceptance on his face. "As best as I can be, Hitoshi-san, my blight sadly revels far too much in the early morning shade." The boy looks back at his quirk, still happily yapping away at the human candy cane. "I can only hope that you, as my fellow curse-bearer, had a better one than I." Izuku gave a nervous smile but nodded. Before any more could be said, the door slid open and Aizawa made himself known. All students quickly found their seats. 6 seconds. You all learn fast. Aizawa's face cracked into a facsimile of a smile before starting the roll call. Izuku didn't know what he was expecting, but today had been normal? Or as normal as it could get when every one of your teachers were pro-heroes. English with present mic, math with cementos, even art history was mostly normal. Although Midnight tried her hardest to make it anything but. This class, however, promised to be different. Heroics 101. No one knew who was teaching the first years, but Izuku had a hunch. The whole class sat chatting amongst themselves, dark shadow dashing between 2 conversations, having the time of her life. It wasn't until a few minutes after class should have started that a thundering set of footsteps could be heard. Izuku smiled. 1A settled down, waiting as the noise grew closer, then the door flew from its hinges. Who has to pay for that? And a hulking burst from the hallway. "I am here." Coming through the door like a normal person. Izuku barely managed to stop himself from facepalming, but he did give his mentor idol a look, one the massive hero definitely saw. Based on the sheepish look on his face, "My apologies for arriving late. Paperwork is my true arch-nemesis." The man struck a pose. The class promptly exploded into noise. Is that his Silver Age costume? All Might's our heroics teacher? So cool. So manly. All Might was clearly used to dealing with excited children, waiting for them to calm down a bit before clearing his throat. "Now that I have your full attention, prepare yourselves. Today, I'll be throwing you right into the deep end." The symbol of peace held up a card. Battle. Heroes deal with 2 things almost daily: fighting and paperwork. The latter will be part of your second-year curriculum, but the prior? That starts today. But because I am here. Mild chatter filled the room, a lot more muted than last time. Bakugo looked ready. Far too ready. Now, before your first day, you were all required to submit a document with your costume requirements, personal taste, and quirk details. Thankfully, UA's support department works fast. A button was pressed and several numbered cases slid from the right wall of the classroom. "You all have 15 minutes to get into your costumes and meet me in ground beta. Aizawa-san has requested that anyone late be sent to his office for a chat." The blonde rushed from the class, laughing as he went. A near repeat of yesterday's class ensued. The locker room was a lot more tolerable this time around. Shinso and Fumikage had noticed Izuku's discomfort with the stares of his class and had formed a makeshift barricade, blocking the shorter boy from the rest of the class. Izuku was near tears the whole time and thanked the two for their thoughtfulness. Tokoyami noted that Dark Shadow would have helped too if that wouldn't have brought more attention. She was pretty sad she couldn't help. Izuku gave her a smile and thanked her for the thought. Izuku's costume was, in his opinion, great. His mother had gone out of her way and made one of his early hero costume designs. He could feel the love from it. He also knew that there was no way it would survive real combat. But there was no way he wouldn't wear it at least once. And what better situation than a safe school activity? He'd wear it this time, then submit a renewed costume design to the support department. Izuku smiled down at himself and made his way out of the locker room, his 3 new friends by his side. Maybe he'd put this costume on display in his room? They say the clothes make the pros, and I'd be inclined to agree. Their teacher beamed at the class, his teeth almost blinding. A blond boy with a rather large belt almost cried at the display. "Excuse me, All Might, Sensei." The robotic teen from the exams shot a hand into the air. "I can't help but notice we're in a city similar to the entrance exams. Will we be fighting robots again? Again? That had to be a vestigial mutation. Arms weren't supposed to move like that. No, young man, today I'll be moving you 5 steps ahead. You see, most villain fights, contrary to public belief, happen inside, backdoor deals, hostage situation, robberies, and today's exercise. Bomb threats." The large man awkwardly flipped through a small set of cue cards. "Today's exercise is a modified version of a game you're most likely familiar with. Heroes and villains. The villains will be given a payload to protect, a nuclear device, and must either guard it or capture the hero team. The hero team, conversely, must either make contact with the bomb to defuse it or capture the villain team. Both teams consist of 2 members. These teams will be decided through a random draw." All Might's robotic speech ended. "Sir, is randomizing the teams really the best course of action?" Before his teacher could interject, Midoriya spoke up. "I think it's smart. Most heroes are called to incidents with little time to prepare a cohesive team. A key part to being a hero is the ability to work together with whoever is at the scene so that the most possible people can be saved." The bespectacled boy nodded. "I see. My apologies, All Might Sensei." All Might produced a box filled with lettered ball, letting the class come up one by one to take a ball and locate whoever ended up with the same letter. Izuku ended up in Group A, alongside. A pair of gloves? It took a second for Izuku to look back on all of his classmates' quirks in his head, and then it hit him. This must be the invisible girl. He remembered her coming in a close second last place, just above Shinso in the quirk apprehension test. Wait, Ishinaked? Nana she can possible maybe her quirkalo share to make her close invisible if willed. If my hypothesis yesterday was correct about their bending light on herself, maybe she can dosa for her close as well? Wait mo moverthan kinkthas maybe she just asked for DNA integrated clothing? DNA integrated clothing? Izuku's eyes snapped up, his mumbling coming to a sharp stop. "Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say that out loud. I know it's probably creepy. I was just wondering how you made your costume invisible." The girl seemed to pause, her gloves stopping mid-air, then she started belly laughing. "Nice joke, Greenie, you almost got me. My gloves aren't invisible, silly." Izuku stopped. It wasn't DNA encoded. She didn't have a costume. Now normally, Izuku would be a blushing, stammering mess right about now, but no, right now Izuku was far too worried? Angry? Definitely something negative, as a band of Blackwhip managed to shoot from between the fingers of his clenched fist and cement itself about a quarter of a meter into the concrete. Izuku forced his quirk back in and turned back to the invisible girl, his face the emotional equivalent of a brick wall. "Sorry, but I didn't get your name earlier." "Hagakure Toru." She held up 2 peace signs. "Nice to meet you, Hagakure-san. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Could I interest you in coming to the support department with me after our round? I'll make sure to get All Might Sensei's permission first. I have some words for them regarding your costume." He looked around the room at the rest of his classmates' costumes. "Maybe more than just yours." Izuku's smile was far too wide. When everyone had found their partners, a screen dropped from the ceiling. Both sides of the screen had a letter that was rapidly changing. One side read heroes, the other side read villains. The 2 letters spun for a few seconds before finally, both stopped. A and D. It looks like our first group has Team A as heroes and Team D as villains. Team D, please make your way to Building A. The fake bomb is currently on the 1st floor but can be moved to wherever you see fit. Team A, you have 5 minutes to plan. There was a moment before Izuku realized who they were facing, Bakugo seemingly coming to the same conclusion at around the same time. The blonde bomber sent an outright murderous smile at the green-haired teen. Izuku dragged his feet all the way to the outside of Building A, muttering both plans and assurances of his own death the whole way. He only stopped muttering when a concerned Hagakure asked if he was okay. This led to a small shriek and slew of apologies before they could begin assembling any form of plan. Do you have any ideas, Midoriya-san? I couldn't quite make out what you were saying earlier. The girl's gloves gestured wildly as she spoke. Yes. I've got plenty of ideas. Sorry, 1 second, I'm just a bit nervous. Izuku closed his eyes, took a deep breath in and pulled out a notebook from. Where did that come from? Toru thought. Izuku focused, his nerves replaced with a look of calm analytical judgment. First of all, Katsuki will be gunning for us, me in particular. We have a bit of history that I'm sure he's going to be delighted to remind me of. I'll distract him as best as possible. What I'm going to need you to do. Izuku pulled out his capture tape, handing it off to Toru. Are you ready, Hagakure-san? The girl gave him 2 thumbs up before removing her costume and completely disappearing. She tucked the capture tapes into each palm and made a fist, completely hiding them from view. If he wasn't so focused on not dying, Izuku would have definitely bombarded the girl with questions about her quirk's mechanics and functions, but as he was more focused on living to see tomorrow. Begin. All Might's voice boomed through the intercoms and the hero team made to enter the building. Toru's steps were quiet, Izuku couldn't even tell she was there and he was on her team. This might just work. The 2 teens made their way through the first floor in silence. They made it up 2 of the 5 floors before Izuku heard the telltale crack of Bakugo's quirk explosion going off. They slowed to a crawl, waiting for the enemy to strike first, something the blonde boy did without hesitation. Bakugo had been searching for the hero team since the match started, for Eyes had said something about making a plan, but he didn't need one, it was just the nerd and an extra. What was so hard about that? You didn't need to make a plan to step on an ant, you just did. Then he heard it, the scuff of shoe on concrete. He exploded, literally, blasting himself forward towards the noise. Deku. Bakugo rounded a corner and immediately locked eyes with Izuku, the FNG nerd. His explosions carried him as he rocketed forward, raising his right fist for his signature hook. He was going to enjoy teaching the waste of space his place. Then he was on the ground, his breath knocked from his chest, then he felt something wrap around his wrists. Bakugo Katsuki is captured. Please make your way out of the building. The F-dash? The F-dash? He thrashed in place for a moment, broke the tape and leveled a glare at the nerd. Deku didn't even flinch. He left the building feeling like he was gonna throw up. In all honesty, Izuku didn't think that would work. He knew that there was no reason for it not to, but for some reason he thought that Katsuki would just escape? Not get captured? That All Might would cover for him? That it would go just like everything else in school had ever gone and Kaken would be above the rules? But no. It worked. He beat Kaken. He was probably going to kill him later. But he beat Kaken. So, calm down. The exercise wasn't over. Good job, Hagakure-san. Izuku said in the general direction he thought she was. I'm over here. She said from behind him. Well, at least he tried. Sorry. He turned around and gave her an awkward smile. They figured that since they hadn't seen Bakugo before this floor that the bomb was probably higher up, and if Katsuki had been gunning for them as hard as Izuku had thought, then the bomb was likely on the 5th floor, so they climbed, and they found something odd. The floor was getting wet. In fact, the higher they got, the wetter the floor got. By the time they'd reached the 5th floor, the floor was drenched, completely covered in a thin layer of water flowing from a closed door, the sound of a running tap emanating from it. Ha! I can hear you, heroic scum. Ida's voice sounded forced, and his laugh was awful. Hagakure couldn't hold back a snicker as they got to the door. They opened it to find Ida, the fake bomb strapped to his back, and a floor covered in about half an inch of water. Try sneaking up on me now, you scum. Ida was a bit too into his role as a villain, dramatic poses and all. Izuku's mind worked a mile a minute. He'd been thinking up unconventional uses for Blackwhip since the assessment test, and one such use fit perfectly. He focused on his repressed rage and shot 4 tendrils out from his legs. 2 tendrils locked him in place. The other 2 darted from his kneecaps and hit the opposing walls, sticking and ricocheting off the walls at high speeds, forming a net-like structure out knee height. Hagakure-san. Get him. He may not have been able to see his partner, but he could most definitely feel the wicked smile that graced her lips. Ida didn't stand a chance. All he could do was watch as the ripples got closer and closer. Then, they stopped, and the tendril bent like a tightrope. Before he could think, the extra weight on his cargo had him losing balance and tripping over a strand of the black substance. The splash as he hit the ground only accentuating All Might's words, "The bomb has been defused. Hero team wins." Izuku let out a hefty sigh of relief and Blackwhip coiled back into his costume. It was fully intact. Nice job, String Bean. Toru clapped him on the back. String Bean? Yeah. 'Cause you're green and your quirk's like a big string. String Bean. That was probably the first not offensive nickname he'd been given in years. Izuku's eyes started watering, at least the building was already flooded, right? Holy shit. Are you okay? I won't call you String Bean if you don't like it. Oh god, I'm so sorry. Izuku looked up at where he thought the voice was coming from and gave a wobbly smile. No, it's okay. I just cry a lot. I like it. There was an awkward pause. Oh right, sorry, forgot I wasn't wearing my gloves. Hold out your hand, I'll help you up. He held up an open hand, his face as red as a tomato, and the invisible girl helped drag him to his feet. Okay, Green Bean, you said something about the support department? Izuku's blush was gone, replaced with a carefully blank smile. Why yes. Yes I did. Nisa didn't know why, but his tea tasted extra good today. Maybe it was in part due to his first lesson with his new pupil being today. He decided to just enjoy it and not question further. Good tea was good, no need to pollute it with worries or unnecessary questions. If he needed to know, he would find out soon enough. He took a deep sip from his cup and sighed. His phone buzzed. Toru was amazed at the ease in which Midoriya had gotten a pass to leave. He had gone up to All Might after they'd named Ida the MVP for his planning. All Might had flinched and nodded, and Midoriya had been given a hall pass. That simple. The two of them were now making their ways through the school, headed on a direct course for the support department. Halfway through their walk, Midoriya had pulled out his phone, tapped rapidly, then waited a moment, before finally pocketing the device, his smile a touch creepier than before. Still carved from stone. Creepier stone. It only took a few minutes before they arrived at the support department. Izuku knocked on the door, and seemed to have to hold himself back upon seeing the teacher. From doing what? She didn't know. Good afternoon, Powerloader-san. Sir, would the third-year Minor Mineta happen to be present today? Powerloader shuddered at the boy's sickly sweet tone but nodded. This boy reminded him too much of the rat. Wonderful. I'll be taking him with me then. Oh, and Majima-sensei, Nizu sends his regards. Powerloader flinched back. This was that student, wasn't it? Sure. One moment, I'll go get him. Powerloader walked back into his class for a moment. New. Why God, why? I could almost see the tips of the sacred mountains. She was just about to lean forward. I was so close. How could you? Neither Izuku nor Toru wanted to know. A second later, the short pro came out with an even shorter purple boy in one of his hands. Here he is. Midoriya, right? Izuku nodded. Powerloader gave a defeated sigh and muttered something about more problems. Before chucking the crying student at him and slamming the door closed, Izuku moved out of the way and the third year slumped into the glass of the window before turning around with a scowl. What do you want? Izuku grimaced. I originally came here to discuss 1A's female student body costume designs. I was told by a reliable source that you were the main designer for over half of them. The boy seemed to cheer up at that. A fellow man of culture, I see. The upperclassman wriggled his eyebrows suggestively. Come to reward me for my brilliant artistic mind? The boy must have cackled for a good solid minute before realizing Izuku wasn't alone. And you've brought along my best work too. Isn't my design just the best, Toru-chan? It took me a lot to sneak that design in without Powerloader-sensei finding out. The boy let out a perverted giggle and smiled like he'd won the lottery. Izuku had had enough. Many people thought the boy was impossible to anger, but at his core, what Izuku valued most was his desire to be a hero and save people. This thing wasn't a person in his eyes, Not anymore, therefore, he had no such desire to help, save nor care for the boy. Instead, he felt rage. Izuku's quirk lashed out at the boy, covering his mouth and restricting his arms, carrying him into the air like a purple balloon. The grape-haired senior struggled as hard as he could but could barely move. Izuku pulled out his notebook, tore out a few pages and handed them to Toru. If you could, Hagakure-san, could you please give Powerloader-san these notes? They're a general overview of your quirk and my hypothesis on how it functions, as well as a rough costume design that should allow for you to use your quirk without your other issues. I have some for some of our other classmates, so if you could bring it up with them when you return to class, it would be most appreciated. I'll see you at lunch. Toru stared after the confusing green boy as he walked away. Once he was out of sight, she turned back to the door and knocked. Powerloader answered again, and she was led inside. Nizu knew he had made the right choice with Midoriya. He was intelligent, if not a bit reckless, that could be trained out, and best of all, he had some of the best quirk analysis he'd seen from anyone below the age of 30. But now he was even more sure. He sat there, combing through all of the submitted designs of a third year, one minor Mineta. Honestly, Nizu never understood human clothing conventions, but the notes that his new protege had scribbled in the margins helped iron out what exactly was wrong. Nizu wasn't even sure how some of these got through. No practical quirk aids? Hell, the main one outlined didn't have any costume at all, and Nizu knew he had signed off on the support department getting access to gene-encoded fabric after the sports festival 2 years ago. When his student had messaged him in regards to who designed his class's costumes, he originally thought it was a minor issue that he needed to bring up with the support technician in charge, something they could iron out in the next iteration of the costume. When said green-haired boy had dragged the very same support technician into his office 10 minutes later with a smile on his face that put even him on edge, well, it was interesting. God, he loved being a teacher. Every year new minds joined his collection, and he got to mold them to be the best they could be. This year was looking to be the most fun he'd had since the unpleasantries he'd done to his former experimenters. Young Midoriya had then gone into great detail on the legal implications of each and every costume the boy had designed, a general overview of the dangers their own costumes provided them, and sample solutions he'd been able to come up with in the 20 minutes it had taken him to leave class, extract the support student and make his way to Nizu's office. The rat smiled to himself, filing the last of the needed paperwork for the expulsion of one of his third years, before sending out the email listing his malpractices to all support agencies in the city. Needless to say, the boy wouldn't be getting hired anytime soon. Though that's if he manages to escape Nizu's lawyers untouched. When Izuku had finally made it back to class, the first thing he noticed was Toru in her sports uniform, surrounded by most of the girls in class. A few of them had been lucky enough to have gotten different support technicians. The emotionally exhausted Green Bean was then pulled in to discuss possible costume changes, and after general agreements from his female classmates, he pulled out a notebook from the void and ripped out each of their pages before handing them out. Izuku was looking forward to his next class. Nizu had assured him they'd be taking it easy, only discussing the course material and enjoying a cup of tea, and right now, as the final battle trial came to a close? That sounded nice. Really nice. Izuku had completely forgotten his meeting with All Might, up until the very moment he saw his mother coming through the front gate. How had he forgotten? So much had happened that day, and he just must have been a bit overwhelmed. He met up with his mother on his way to All Might's office. Inko looked ready for just about everything. A pack of tissues in her purse, a neck pillow in case she passed out, and something that looked a bit too much like a taser. They rounded the last corner and knocked on the symbol of peace's door. The emaciated form of Toshinori greeted them and led them inside, closing the door after them. Nizu sadly couldn't make it, too much paperwork to deal with. Izuku felt a bit guilty at that. Why have you called this meeting, young Midoriya? It sounded urgent, but you seemed fine in class today. The tall man asked, a confused look on his face. Sorry, yes, it's urgent, I think. I completely forgot about it. I was too busy fanboying at all of our teachers. It's about one for all. I had this dream. There was this giant space, a void filled with stars, and 7 suns. I got pulled over to one of them and it turned into one of the previous holders of one for all? Dagoro Banjo. He mostly told me about how he was happy with my progress, how One for All's strength enhancer was too much for my body, and how the quirk was changing due to something he did when I first manifested it. All Might and Inko nodded along. It was all pretty weird, but it wasn't alarming. But he told me to ask you about someone called All for One? All Might flinched back at the name and stiffened, a look of shock etched into his face. He then got up and bowed as deep as he could. I'm so sorry, my boy. I completely forgot to tell you. When he got back up, his face was grave, a look of resignation on his face. All for One is my nemesis, our nemesis, One for All's antithesis. In the past he's been called the boogeyman, the quirk thief, and the ruler of the underworld. His quirk, the power to take and give quirks as he sees fit. Izuku's face was a mix between curiosity and horror. Inko was about to faint. He was the one who made One for All. Long, long ago, at the dawn of quirks, there were two brothers, twins. One had a quirk and the younger, seemingly, did not. In an attempt to make his brother loyal, the older of the twins forced a quirk into him. Energy Stockpile was originally a quirk that boosted the user over time, reinforcing their body and letting them hit harder the more they trained. But what they didn't know was that the younger brother did have a quirk. The ability to pass on his quirk. By itself it was useless, but when it fused with Energy Stockpile. And so, I caved in his skull. There was no way he could have survived, but they never found the body. If you decide this is too much, I won't blame you. The only reassurance I can give you is my own belief that he is truly dead. Izuku took it all in, his mother next to him. She'd passed out a while ago. While I would have loved to know this before I took your quirk, I don't think it would have changed much. I would have still accepted the torch even if he was alive. Izuku stared directly into Yagi's eyes. I will be a hero, no matter what it takes, no matter whom I have to face, I'll make you proud. He smiled his most confident smile. Toshinori nodding in acceptance, his own smile lightly cresting his face. You already have my boy. Lunch had been a great distraction from his thoughts. Lunch Rush made some of the best katsudon Izuku'd ever had, and his friends, whilst obviously curious, hadn't asked where he'd been. As he left the cafeteria, Izuku took out his phone and stared down at what Nizu had sent him one last time. Good afternoon, Izuku-chan. I know I told you we'd be having an easy lesson today, but I'm a bit busy. Taking care of a certain third years. Jean Bear. So there's been a change. The plans. 1:05 p.m. Small mate. Sorry, Nizu-sensei. It's all my fault you have to deal with. More paperwork than usual. 1:07 p.m. Nonsense, Izuku-chan. Finding out now is a lot better than finding out when one of my students get hurt. 1:08 p.m. School map.p. Hallway B178 Section 13A. 1:08 p.m. Now, I've sent you the general location of one of my tunnel entrances. Your task today is exploration. I'll be expecting you to use them to get to my classes from now on. 1:09 p.m. Izuku had really been looking forward to his class with the principal, but then again, he guessed that it was kind of his fault to begin with. He shook off the self-deprecation and got back on task. Izuku checked the map Nizu had sent him and turned the last corner. It was a normal hallway, pretty much identical to the last few he'd walked through. Midoriya made his way down, noting that each segment of the hallway was marked with a number, discreetly placed near the upper corner. The first thing he discovered was that there was no Section 13. The hallway led to a dead end, everything inside it abruptly stopping right where Section 13 should have been, the ceiling light cut off halfway, the lines of the floor that usually stopped about a meter before any dead ends ramming straight into the base of the wall. Nothing truly noticeable at first glance, just odd. Izuku scanned the room, no indents in the wall, nothing off color, no levers, no holes. Nothing. At least, nothing noticeable. The green-haired boy set to work, sticking to sections 9 to 12. He ran his hands against the walls, once at about shoulder height, then a second time at where he guessed Nizu's shoulder height would be. Nothing there. What was something that Nizu could do that others couldn't, wouldn't, or wouldn't think of doing? The green bean let his mind wander. How was English class going? Apparently the rest of his class were being taught by Present Mike. Present Mike, acoustic trigger maybe? But what would the passcode be? May as well try. A few wrong guesses couldn't hurt after all. Section 13A. No response, no movement, nothing. Rat God. Again, nothing. Hallway B178. No cigar. Other ideas. Izuku sat on the floor, crossed his legs, and opened his phone, checking the map again. It wasn't really so much of a map as it was a basic schematic of the building. He looked closely, zooming into any writing, notes, or symbols. Nothing stood out to him, but this was Nizu. It probably wasn't supposed to. Then it hit him. This was Nizu. Why would he make one of his secret entrances noticeable at? Why not remove the cut-off lights? Or paint over the lines on the floor? The green-haired boy sat up, turned around and made his way back to the start of the hallway. He stood at the T-intersection facing out into the wall across the hall. A map hung from it, a completely wrong map. Well, not wrong, just different. It wasn't a map of the school. Now that he looked closer, it wasn't a map at all. It was a maze. A rather simple maze, in fact, it was already solved. Izuku followed the red line as it twisted through the maze. At about a third of the way in, it crossed through a wall, then just kept going like nothing happened. No more walls were crossed and it reached the end of the maze. It ended in an arrow pointing right. This was either some weird Nizu metaphor completely unrelated to his current goal, or a clue. Izuku wrote down each turn in a notebook and decided he may as well see where it would lead. Could it be nothing? Sure, but he didn't have any other ideas and he had the better part of 2 hours. What harm was a few minutes of walking? Left, left, straight, right, and finally at an L intersection that only goes right, turn left. Izuku stared at the wall. He was in the bowels of the school now. He was on the 8th floor and he'd passed by the 3E homerooms 2 turns ago and hadn't seen any non-staff doors since. First things first, he ran his hands against the wall, searching for any indents, pressure-based triggers. Nothing here either. Hallway B178. He heard a click. Then the floor was gone. Izuku fell a good 10 to 15 meters into the darkness below, his screams being silenced from the outside world when the trapdoor slammed shut above him. Luckily, a pile of something soft broke his fall and a set of lights blinked on, illuminating the small room he was in and the pile of geometrically shaped pillows he'd landed on, one such pillow being a seemingly seamless sphere. He didn't want to know how that worked. Midoriya looked around. There were 4 walls. They were all a soft seafoam green and were a bit over 2 meters tall. The floor wasn't very visible under all of the pillows, but the bits that were looked to be made of wood. On each wall there was a door or exit of some kind, each one a different size but none too small to crawl through. Hanging from the doorway in front of him was a sign. "Welcome to the maze." Izuku walked up to the sign, noting something pinned to the same wall at about shoulder height. A few large, folded pieces of grid paper sat in a holster. He pulled one out and unfolded it. It was about 1 meter by 1 meter. In the corner there were the words, Floor 7, and in the lower right-hand side was a small 3 by 3 box with openings on each side. Izuku looked around and nodded to himself. The room he was in looked to be about 3 meters squared. Leave it to Nizu to have him make his own map. He grabbed the other pieces of paper, sliding them into his backpack. Better get to work. Nizu sat in his office. He was ecstatic that his new apprentice had already done something to help his fellow students. He was less ecstatic when a certain purple-haired school board member practically knocked down his door an hour after he'd sent out the notice of expulsion for one Minoru Mineta. "Good afternoon, Minoru-san. I wasn't aware we had a meeting this afternoon." The rat gave the woman a practiced smile, but his hackles were raised. "How dare you? You overgrown rat. Whatever could you be talking about, Minoru-san?" He allowed his smile to widen just a bit when she snarled at him. "You think you can just expel my son? As a member of the board, this will not stand." Nizu was sure at least a bit of spittle had gotten on his desk. He'd have to have his office cleaned tonight. And is that the express opinion of the entire board? Nizu's smile was definitely too wide now, but the woman paid no mind. In fact, she was smiling. "Why, yes, it is. So you can either revoke your expulsion or face the combined might of the school board." She seemed rather triumphant. Nizu, on the other hand, felt like a kid in a candy shop. He'd have to give his protege a gift for giving him such an opportunity. Did Izuku like cheese? Problems for later. For now, he pulled out a tape recorder from under his desk, its small red light dim in the afternoon glow. Thank you for your words, Minoru-san. I'll be happy to let the right authorities know that all school board members currently staffed are in support of Mineta-chan's blatant sexualization of minors and their costumes and are willing to overlook the forgery of a teacher's signature he used to get them approved for use. The woman went stiff. You have no proof, came her half-hearted response. He turned his monitor to the purple-haired woman. Oh, quite the contrary, Minoan. I have plenty. On screen were several incriminating videos, all centered around a grape-haired boy. Now, if you could please exit the premises, you'll hear from the authorities soon regarding both your position and your son's court date. The older Minoru stumbled out in a daze, the doors shutting themselves behind her. He'd been waiting to replace the current school board with more trusted personnel for a few years now, so this was just perfect. Especially since one of the worst costume designs had been made for one Yaoyorozu Momo, sole heir of the Yaoyorozu family. Could this day get any better? Apparently, it could. As Nizu got a notification from the school defense systems, he glanced at the pop-up and his smile grew. A certain green-haired child had found his way into the maze. He was once again reminded how much of a blessing his new mentee was. Izuku had been wandering the labyrinth between UA's walls for about an hour now. Izuku had decided to go through and find an entrance on each floor of each quadrant of the school building and was currently on floor 5 of the back left segment. He'd marked down any entrances and exits he'd passed, luckily easy to find from the inside, but he hadn't exited the maze in fear of needing specific passwords that he didn't have access to. Instead, he'd crawled through the joining segments between each tower via the access on the 11th floor and once through a small tunnel he'd found that went under the school building entirely. He'd sat down now in one of the small rest areas. This one had a comfy couch, a coffee table and a small pile of beanbags in the corner. He set his stack of grid paper down and began to sift through the rooms he'd liked. A room filled with a personal library containing hard-to-find books that he'd found on floor 8 of the back right tower, a crawlspace with one-way glass that let him see into the hallway below on floor 3 in the front left tower, a room filled with CCTV of the entire school. He'd have to go back to that when the third years had quirk training, and his personal favorite, a seemingly new elevator that could be accessed somehow from a hallway next to Class 1A and went up to a hallway a few doors down from the principal's office. It was a nightmare to plot everything on his makeshift set of maps. Luckily, it didn't need to be perfect, but within the last half hour of his PRD he'd managed to properly label, color code and edit most of what he'd discovered. He'd have to ask Nizu about exploring them more often, and maybe get some info on the other access points entry requirements. Izuku sent a message to Nizu and a photo of each of his maps before making his way out of the nearest exit point, which just so happened to be in the ceiling of the 1H support lab, which should have been empty right about now. His last thoughts were a refined, oh shit, as the trapdoor opened beneath him a little faster than expected. Thankfully something cushioned his fall. Excuse me, but could you get up? You're squashing me and my baby here. Oh God, he'd fallen on a mother and her child. What if they're hurt? What if the baby's hurt? Why was a baby in the support lab? He quickly scrambled back, assessing the situation as quickly as possible. In front of him was a girl about his age, with thick, dirty pink dreadlocks, holding what looked to be a large shoe. She was in oil-stained overalls, covered in an unhealthy amount of soot, and from the bags under her eyes, hadn't slept in at least 2 days. I'm so sorry. Is your baby okay? The girl smiled at him, bright and disarming. Yup, he's right here. She slapped the shoe in her hands. My baby number 71, hover boots. Pair this with my lovely baby 48 and you'll be able to fly like an eagle. She excitedly pointed at what looked to be a jetpack on a desk to her right. The wish, huh? It took him a second for the boy to process her words before everything clicked into place. Baby's inventions, he deflated in relief. The girl got up and set her invention on the desk beside her. So what brings you here, Ceiling-kun? Looking for some gear? As the future CEO of Hatsum Industries, I can help outfit you with any of your heroic needs. From power armor to rocket launchers. Oh, could I interest you in a rocket launcher? The girl swapped from point to point in rapid succession, her pupils contracting and dilating every few seconds. If Izuku was anyone else, he'd probably have had a hard time understanding it all. I was exploring. Are you inheriting the business? I've never heard of it before, so does that mean you're planning on starting up the company yourself? And I don't think I need a rocket launcher at the moment, but I'll let you know if that changes. I keep seeing your eyes shift. Is that your quirk? What does it do? Izuku threw back just as fast. Starting it myself. I'll be the best inventor ever and have all the funding in the world. My quirk is Zoom. It lets me see things clearly from up to 5 kilometers away, though I mainly use it as a magnifying glass for when I'm wiring my babies. The girl turns to her desk and seemingly continues what she was doing before he fell. Izuku walked around the room, staring at the various inventions in various states of completion. What caught his eye most was the backpack. Was this inspired by Airjet? The exterior looks slightly different, but without his quirk, modifications probably needed to be made to allow flight. The girl perked up but didn't turn away from her project. Yes. You're the first person to notice. Baby number 48's propulsion system is a modified version of Airjet's backpack. The vents on the back intake air and concentrate it, before shooting it out, that mixes with the thruster's own propulsion to create enough lift for a few seconds of flight. And it only explodes 10% of the time. What do you think, Sealing-kun? Need a jetpack? Izuku didn't know how to take that last part. In with the rest of the things he'd rather not think about it goes. That's so cool. But I'll have to decline for now, sorry. Oh, and my name's Midoriya? Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you. Izuku bowed, but she paid him no mind, far too busy with her work. Oh right, Papa-san says I should introduce myself when I meet new people. Nice to meet you, Sealing-kun, I'm Hatsune. She said offhandedly. If you don't mind me asking, Hatsune-san, why are you still here? Didn't school finish like 10 minutes ago? The girl waved her hand non-committally. Papa-san says that if I don't explode anything I can stay till he has to lock up the labs. I've got at least another hour, till he remembers he needs to. Your dad works here? Izuku was baffled. He didn't know any of the teachers had children. It sounds like they're a support teacher, but which one? Yes and no, my dad's dead. Papa-san took me in a few years ago and I've officially been a ward of UA since I passed the exam. I'm supposed to call him Magikarp-sensei or something, but names are hard. Magikarp-sensei? Majima? Powerloader-sensei? Majima-sensei? Hatsune pointed back at him blindly, still fully focused on her work. Yeah. Papa-san, Magikarp-sensei. She was certainly interesting. Well, I've gotta go. I'll see you next time, Hatsune-san. Izuku made his way to the steel doors. Bye-bye, Sealing-kun. He closed the doors behind himself and sighed. Interesting indeed. Izuku got home, hugged his mother for a solid 5 minutes, cried a bit, devoured a bowl of katsudon like his life depended on it, showered, and got in bed. He needed to sleep. Today was rough. Izuku's morning felt like a dream. He got up, showered in a daze, ate breakfast in a daze and made his way all the way to the front gates in said daze. Only coming out of it to greet Shinso when they met at the station. What finally broke him out of it completely were the dozens of reporters outside of the front gates, a veritable herd of press pestering any student that passed them by. They seemed drawn to the scent of All Might, asking questions about his lessons, teaching style, professional attitude and the like. Izuku and Shinso only barely managed to slip through unnoticed thanks to the well-timed intervention of Present Mike and Eraserhead. Good morning, students. Aizawa's quiet drawl pierced the mild chatter of the classroom. Students stopping mid-conversation to essentially fling themselves at their seats. A pink-haired girl lost control of her quirk and slammed face first into her desk. The elbows that once supported her now spread to either side. The teacher paid no mind to their antics and made his way to the lectern. After reviewing your battle trials from yesterday, I've come to a few conclusions. First of all, the class sat with bated breath. Another expulsion? Did they mess up that badly? All Might is a horrible teacher. The entire class sweat dropped. Second, you all need to learn basic hand-to-hand. A brown-haired girl seemed ecstatic. Lastly, the man grimaced. How many of you have had proper quirk counseling? Only a handful of students raised their hands. Of course. The teacher rubbed his brow, an exasperated sigh escaping his lips. I'll be discussing this with Nizu, But don't be surprised if you get a permission slip for a free quirk counseling session in the mail sometime next week. Aizawa looked around the room, his eyes lingering on a few students, notably Izuku, Hitoshi, a blonde boy with a streak of black in his hair, and the brown-haired girl who seemed interested in hand-to-hand. Final order of business before I take a nap. You all need to decide something that will affect the rest of your time here at UA. He once again garnered the attention of the entire class, all of them sitting straighter in their seats. You need to decide on a class representative. Pandemonium. I would make a great class rep. Pick me. Hands were raised as high as possible. Choose me for class rep. I should be class rep. An arm rose above all others and a voice followed soon after. I think we should hold a vote. Ida's back was about as straight as a ruler, his free arm chopping for dear life. Would that be okay, Aizawa-sensei? The tall teen directed his gaze to their teacher. You can pick however you see fit. So long as you don't disturb my nap. Ida bowed at a 90-degree angle. Understood, sensei. Everyone? Ida swiveled, staring around the class. Wouldn't we all just vote for ourselves, Karo? A green-haired girl asked. All the more reason for the person who gets voted in to be rep. If someone gets multiple votes, it shows the class already trusts someone enough to give away their own chance. Manly, came a quiet murmur. The class agreed with Ida's assessment of the situation and thus, the voting began. Each student was handed a small slip of paper produced from Yaoyorozu. Izuku hoped he'd gotten that right. Somehow he'd ended up learning more about their quirks than their names in the past few days. He wrote down her name. She seemed like the responsible type. The only other options were Ida and his friends. Ida was a bit too stiff and both of his friends would probably hate the job more than anything. And that makes 6 votes for Midoriya and 3 for Yaoyorozu. Izuku was extremely confused. Who voted for him? But what? Katsuki seconded that, a crackle coming from his hands before. Who the F voted for Shitty Dew? I'm 100 times the hero he'll ever be. He was livid. Maybe because one of you is nice, and the other is a flaming pile of garbage with spite. Karo. Izuku would need to get the green-haired girl's name. That was the first time he'd seen someone their age stand up to Kaken. A girl thought he was nice? That had never happened before. Well, there was that time with the fake love letter. But that didn't count. Back to the dark side of his mind that memory goes. Aizawa shuffled, then emerged from his cocoon and stretched. Congratulations, Midoriya, you're our representative. Yaoyorozu, you're our vice representative. Well done. The man gave about 3 slow claps, before turning to leave the room. Your next class starts soon, I'm gonna go finish a deal with the rat. And with that the glorified hobo disappeared into the halls. Izuku spent the next 5 minutes going around the class and learning everyone's names. He wasn't used to people not hating him. It was hard to get used to, but every single one of his classmates seemed happy to give their names and tell him a little about themselves. He'd have to update his analysis notes after class. But it was too late to do that now. Midnight definitely wouldn't let him do anything but art history in her class. Lunch was a bit more intensive than it was yesterday. 1A had taken over a corner of the cafeteria to go over class matters, and 1B's class representatives were also present alongside a few of their peers. They were running through inter-class activity ideas when the alarms went off, the lights flashing red and a strikingly loud warning coming from the speakers. Izuku acted fast. Asking Yaoyorozu for some noise-canceling headphones was his top priority. It took her a few seconds, but Kyoka seemed to appreciate them nonetheless. He then gathered his class closer together, trying to avoid getting separated in the rush. Yaoyorozu had asked an upperclassman what was happening and barely made out something about a level 3 security breach. When they were grouped, Izuku let out a tendril of Blackwhip, forming a rope for his class to hold on to before descending into the stampede. His plan was very quickly foiled when another student sent an elbow into his gut by accident, his quirk failing and sending him on a dead course for the window. A window which he slammed into with the force of a small car. He was thankful for UA's building material quality, as any other window would have happily sent him out into the open air. It took Izuku a minute to right himself. He couldn't see his classmates, but he could see out of the window. A window that just so happened to have a great view of the press spilling onto campus from the front gates. The press? Really? If only he had a way to tell everyone, maybe if He hesitated, looking out at the crush of students. Then something caught his eye, a blond boy on the ground, one of 1B's students. He didn't look too good and it was only getting worse by the second. No one noticed he'd fallen, everyone too busy trying to shove their way to the exit. If nothing happened, the boy could get seriously hurt. If it got worse, there was a chance he could die. Izuku's face hardened and he did what he did best, moved without thinking. He didn't have a plan, just a gut instinct to act. 3 tendrils shot from his back, piercing the ceiling before congealing into a stickier substance. His body lurched up, he barely noticed the pain as his back collided with something hard. He curled his fingers into a loose O shape and one last tendril manifested into his hand, spiraling into an open cone. He put his lips to the small end and yelled, "Everyone stop right this second, or so help me I will tell the rat." While that threat made absolutely zero sense to the first years, the second and thirds knew all too well what Nizu was capable of, all of them having had at least one class or exam with the Chimera. The entire stampede stopped and Izuku allowed himself a calming breath before continuing, "It's just the media. They're currently annoying our teachers at the front gates. If any of you still have your pride as a hero intact, look around, help up any students that have fallen over and get your butt in gear." The adrenaline high was calming down now, and Izuku was barely fighting off his anxiety. "If anyone is hurt, please have another classmate assist you to Recovery Girl's office. She's more likely to be mad if you don't go. Please. Please form orderly lines and make your way back. Make your way back to class. Thank you." The green-haired boy wished to do nothing more than dart into one of the nearby maze entrances, but he had a responsibility to fulfill as a class rep, so carefully he scanned the room from his vantage point and found his classmates. He was happy to note that the blonde from earlier had been picked off the ground by 1B's class rep and seemed to be doing all right. When he was above his classmates, he let his quirk slowly drop him to the ground. His classmates were all staring at him in varying states of respect, awe and, well, Katsuki was glaring. But this was the most approval he'd been given by any group of peers since. It was a bit too much for him. He hunched over, his hands coming up quickly to cover his rather red face. "Oh, let's get going." He turned around and tried to ignore his classmates as they made their way to the 1A classroom. For once Katsuki's explosive attitude was helping him calm down, a shout of, "You can't tell me what to do, shitty nerd," being the perfect counter to his class's admiration. Aizawa had come into the class half an hour later, looking more exhausted than ever, chugging coffee directly from a pot. The class was brief on what tripped the alarm. Someone had used a destructive quirk to forcefully open the front gates, and the media had taken to the hole in security like a group of ducks to water. School ended a PRD early due to the break-in and almost everyone had immediately gone home, almost everyone. Izuku, Tokoyami, Dark Shadow and Hitoshi were once again biding their time together so that Shinso didn't have to go home early. Izuku thought it weird that Shinso tried his hardest to stay out till home time, but decided that Shinso would tell them if it was important. On a more positive note, Izuku had managed to get one piece of information from their get-together. Tokoyami and Dark Shadow had asked to be called by their first names. Plural. It turns out, Fumikage wasn't just Tokoyami's name. When he was about 7, Tokoyami had given Dark Shadow the K part of his name, and from there on out, Tokoyami had become Fumi-san, and Dark Shadow had become Kage-chan. Izuku was just happy to have another 2 friends he was on a first-name basis with. Dinner had been a bit of an affair as Mama Enko was still a little on edge from the break-in, but seeing that her baby boy was okay had settled her down quite quickly. Izuku dreamt of Katsudon, yellow capes and smoke that night, and woke up feeling proud of himself and Yagi. Not All Might. Good. Breakfast was good, and like yesterday he met up with Shinso at the train station. Unlike yesterday, Fumi and Kage ran into them near the entrance and the 4 made their way to class together, getting there with a good 10 minutes to spare. Izuku parted with his friends to finish up a conversation he was having with Yaoyorozu the other day, a small debate regarding one of the rules in the handbook and how it was meant to be interpreted. A few seconds after they were done talking, Kyoka Jiro, a girl with dark purple hair, stood up and told the class Aizawa was approaching. No one questioned how she knew, but they all knew it wasn't a joke. No one would joke about Aizawa showing up. Everyone was seated and quiet when Aizawa opened the door. Aizawa's face split into a sheet-eating grin. Good. You can learn. Kyoka. Don't warn them next time. Anyone else is free to do so if they can tell when I'm coming. Let this be a lesson in information gathering. How did Aizawa know it was Kyoka? No one wanted to know. And that was just how Aizawa liked it. Shota made his way to the chalkboard and faced his class, a neutral expression plastered back onto his features. Today, problem children. We'll be doing something different. The man turned around and in large, bold letters, wrote, Rescue Training. The man turned back to his class. Today we'll be having an excursion to one of the more out-of-the-way facilities here at UA. You can choose to wear either your sports uniform or your hero costume. Those who have submitted revisions, your costumes aren't ready yet, so you'll be stuck with sports uniform or sports uniform. The man let his face contort back into a smile. You have 10 minutes to meet me out the front of Gym Gamma, starting. The class tensed. A few seconds ticked by. Why are you guys still here? Sheet. And they were off. Aizawa allowed himself to smile all the way down to the front of Gym Gamma. 9 minutes, 23 seconds. 10 civilians died whilst you were getting changed. How will you console their families? The class looked mortified. Good, now you're getting it. Aizawa pointed behind him at a large bus. Get on. Izuka had to suppress a sigh as Yaoyorozu had to almost physically stop Ida from telling the class to make orderly lines based on the order of their names. The buses had an open seat layout, something that made Ida deflate. Conversation soon made its way to people's lips, mostly talk about quirks. Kirishima complained about his quirk not being flashy. Izuku went on a mini-tangent about how cool said boy's quirk was before realizing who he was talking to and promptly falling into an uncomfortable silence. The boy had responded with something along the lines of, manly, uber cool man, manly, so manly, but Izuku had mainly blocked it out. He didn't blame the boy for his comment in the changing room, but it still irked him. His brain was slowly realizing that. The boy thought everything was manly, but the brain was irrational, and it would take some time before he wouldn't flinch at the boy's words. Somewhere along the lines of conversation Su had brought up his quirk and its similarities to Edgeshot, asking if he was planning to go the medical route to potentially use his quirk for first aid. Izuku would have to bring that up with Nizu and All Might. After about 10 minutes of driving, the bus came to a stop outside of a large glass dome, supported on all sides by a deep purple frame and base. Aizawa got out of the bus, leading his class closer to the dome before turning around and gesturing with wide arms and his trademark sheet-eating grin. Welcome, problem children, to the USJ.